Where are you from, sir?
From Harlem, USA. Bigger, better, and blacker than Disney World.
You know, you gotta love Uptown, Baba, and
You have a style when you could be up from Uptown.
oh, it's different. It's different. You move a little different. The chopped cheese is a little different, right? So you know, everybody's heading to visit. I have a question. How did your family end up there? Because I know with Harlem, especially with said demographic and time frames, a lot of people migrated from the south north. I'm not sure if that was y'all's case, but how did you guys make it to the city?
So, I'm from immigrant family, Jamaican and as well as Puerto Rican. So my mother's family is Puerto Rican, and the mother and the father's family is Jamaican. So we, immigrants. We immigrated from those places and came up here to the city for a better life. As well as I also have some roots down from Louisiana. By way of Virginia, so from Louisiana to Virginia, turns out that I also have some Haitian blood after doing some DNA. So all of those things are really interlocked and in there. So, yeah, that's it.
No, really beautiful mix and really prototypical. In the city, either you're half Italian or half Puerto Rican. You know what I'm saying? Somehow we all interact, and it's such a beautiful gumbo, I guess you could call it. Now, you being from Harlem, what was it like growing up as a young man in the era that you were coming up with? What was the neighborhood like? What were the things you were seeing and feeling?
So that's a very interesting question. I mean, I really had a. I used to say that it was gangs, and it was violence everywhere. Drugs were everywhere on both sides of the street. You have it on across the street and inside their building, drug and needles, and it was really, really horrific. Growing up in the '60s, and particularly when you're talking about dealing with the type of era that it was in terms of against the war, civil rights, being Africans and being immigrants. And, my father always talks about living in a railroad flat and really how, the darkness of coming into this country, living in this country, but we had each other. And so in spite of everything, we struggled in Harlem and persevered. I lived in the Bronx. I lived in Brooklyn. I lived in Long Island, Queens. So I had a really cross section coming from Harlem and coming back to Harlem later on. I've been kind of living here. So yeah, it was really about civil rights and about changing the world, changing our structure, our belief patterns, and becoming liberated and have a certain about of liberation. That's really what our history was about.
And you look at people from those kind of beginnings, marginal, the struggle, obstacles. What does that do to a fortitude? What does that do to a willpower? How did those experiences and the things you saw there, which I'm sure there's so many stories, how did that fortify you as you ultimately went into adulthood and grew?
One of the things that I have to give praise for my mother and my father and for all of my upbringing and my teachers and those who, it fortified you in the way that you have a certain level of tenacity to move forward beyond the obstacles of what your present situation is. And so I feel that I moved beyond and above the obstacles of that I was living in. I vowed that I would never want to live in some of those really harsh areas, and ended up coming back to Harlem to fight and be here so that I could be among my people. And I think it's very interesting because you fight so much to want to leave, and then you realize the best place for you to be is to be who you are is where you were from.
Yeah, I love that. And to make a reference of the gentleman, we all know who he is. Mike Tyson said things like that. He said, and just recently he was in Brownsville walking around, hanging out with the people. He said, I have to be a man of my people. And when you look at the position of Babalawo, we are of our people. When we're from certain areas, we have a certain set of problems that, people will gravitate towards us, and we have to be that beacon and that cornerstone for them of hope, which I think is what our position personifies. Now, Harlem has always, from what I've seen, especially being a young man when we would visit New York and things like that to go see family, straight culture. people are outside, there's music, you're seeing these flags, you're seeing, the expressions of all the different, ethnicities that are there. How in contact were you, or how important was it for your parents to instill the values that came with being of, of a Caribbean background? How at the forefront was it for you?
And just imagine, I mean, you got to think about Christmas time. Christmas time was always rice and peas. You knew you're
Yeah,
going to things. They're going to have certain foods that are very, very culturally bound. Rice and peas is a staple for both Puerto Rican as well as the Jamaican side of my families, but particularly, really connected to the Jamaican more, and just in terms of food. Food was really, really key. So I really, really appreciate having those kind of things happening in the family. But I just tell you that um, going over the history and really wanting to connect. That's it. You want to connect to those things that connect you back to your past. And because it's like the 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗂 talks about, we have to look back, look back. It's called 𝗃𝗶𝗍, look back, so we can look back to
she.
move forward. And that's so very vital and important.
Yeah, you have to know where you've been to know where you're going, and being, so from backgrounds that are so spiritually rich. You look at Jamaica and all its indigenous cultures and even concepts like obia, and then you look at Puerto Rico, with the spiritism and a lot of, Afro-Indigenous people arriving there through the slave trade as well. What were your first experiences with spirituality in general?
So my first spiritual experience got to be really, really interesting. Well, of course, I was born Catholic, so that was I don't say, and I say of course, but and that was a road in itself. And my mother making her transition to about Islam, and so the Nation of Islam became part of our experience, eating bean pies and separating ourselves from meat, well, particularly pork. We went from that, and also going from to the Baptist church, from trying to find her own spirituality. But in all of that, we had an experience with 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, and we had an 𝗃𝗃𝗃 in the house, and we had, so early on in my life, I was really exposed to the Orisha community through 𝘃𝗺𝗻𝗵𝗵 Adefumi the First, who was the king of Oyotunji village, and where I'm now being crowned chief, Oriapo, as Ariapo. So that helps to, go and, speaks to volumes to what the lessons and things that we learn. So, I mean, I went to Islam, eventually back to Islam, back to Christianity, before I went to Palo Mayombe, Palo Monte, and started studying, and eventually Palo Cambisa, and did it, moved to this whole myriad of spiritual experience. But and just coming across some of the greatest masters of the time, and so that was really, really important and very helpful.
Beautiful. And you look at the Babalawo by nature, he is a traveling man. When you look at Orumila, even though Ifa was his base study, you look at all these various Odus where he interacted with all these other prophets and really illuminated minds, whether it was Jesus and 𝘃𝗶𝗍𝗃, or the Buddha and 𝘃𝗵𝗍𝗃, or, Muhammad and Baba 𝘃𝗵𝗍𝗃. He interacted with all of them, and he exchanged ideas with all of them, and it just fortified him more, because even though everything is in Ifa, everything is not Ifa, if that could be understood. There's things we have to, counter relate and, counter analyze to be able to come to a finite conclusion. So, after this trajectory and experiencing so much with such great people, at what point are you like, I want to be a Babalawo, I want to be a priest and a figure within this faith?
So in 1972, 𝘃𝗺𝗻𝗵𝗵 Adefumi the First, he did a reading for me, and the Odu. I later asked him what was the Odu, and he says it probably was 𝘃𝗺𝗃𝗃𝗃, because I explained to him what the information that he had given me.
Wow.
But he really told me at that time that I was going to be a Babalawo. I was going to be involved with the community. I had to learn to respect my elders and be able to teach and be able to, and I was looking at him. I said, "What, me? Be like you, a chicken killer? Never." You know, was far as from, as what they say, how far as Pluto is from the sun. It's like out there. It's really beyond what I ever conceived. And of course, my mom was really upset because she had brought me there. She wanted me to be respectful. And the man just told you to be respectful of your elders. And I was like, but a chicken killer, I'm not going to be like this guy here. And, really that was my concept. We really had a very, very delegated kind of concept. And as many people still do to us, in terms of Ifa and about who we are as a people and what is our culture versus our religion and that is by really by definition, because we often hear people talking about religion, but it's our culture more than it is a religious practice. It's a cultural practice, and it's our own, and it represents the experience of who we are. Whether we are Taino, whether we are, Haitian, or whether but we're all African, no matter how you come with. So some parts of it goes back to Africa teaching the world and teaching humanity the reality of presence. People hate everything about slavery but Christianity.
Yeah, definitely incredible. You look at, and I've had the pleasure and the humbling experience of initiating so many neo-African Black people back into Ifa, and that is probably the most traumatic thing for them. For some that come up in the church and whatnot, being able to break away and go back to their roots, which was a huge inspiration for the name of the channel in general. It's been very gratifying. Not to say one or the other, but just to allow people to understand the cultural aspect, like you mentioned, where we are, where we come from, and what we can do, when you see so much precedence. Now, Baba, for those who are not aware, could you please, educate or orient people on what is the Oyotunji village, as far as its trajectory and its history?
So the Oyotunji village was a group of men and women who were living in Harlem, and we're going to go back into the 1954 and
Wow.
going into 1954, 1956, when some with voodoo, the idea of voodoo came into being, and Surgeman Adefumi and a couple of other people who were culturally bound, they decided they wanted to understand voodoo. And so part of what they did is they took a trip with Chris Oliano, and they went to Havana, Cuba, and they got initiated to what in what a surgeon described as, he was thinking it was voodoo, but he was being initiated to the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 system. And so he came back with the Orisha gods and goddesses, and he looked at these pots of them full with stones and didn't even know what he had. Over a course of years, some of the people that were with him and around him, they began to branch off. Some of like 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁. We talk about the Akan system. All of that was born out of really that initial push and for voodoo, and to also to be able to go to the 𝘃𝗶𝗏𝗏 system. And that was what the cornerstone of a lot of African Americans experience, and people who are African descent in New York City, because it was about struggling. And so they would wear their African clothes, and they would cut out sheets, and they would put pockets on it, and make dashikis out of pillowcases, and really, or they would cut their regular shirts and cut the sleeves, and they were infusing themselves and really trying to have a sense of identity. And identity is premier. It is the ultimate thing that wanted to have Africans in the diaspora. We wanted to have an identity, and that was not about struggle, about a time in which we were free. And the only way we could figure out being free was to be able to connect to the African past. And we noticed that Haiti had used their religion to become free. So that was part of the Americans, or the experience of African Americans, at least in that time.
No, definitely a strong history there, and really pioneering work done to be able to reconnect and, join back to, where we came from. And you look at concepts like even the ones that Marcus Garvey, with the Pan-African, and going back to, and looking at the metaphysical message there. It's not necessarily moving back to the continent, but just coming back in contact with, where we come from, and reassimilating that identity and having pride in it, So definitely honorable stuff to be at the frontier of that, and, let people know it's okay to be that, rather than that which is accepted. So with this chieftaincy now, what has the process been like to be able to get there? Because you look at somebody like yourself, decades in the culture, decades of study, how arduous has it been to get there? And, what has been the most gratifying part as you work towards, this now title?
So, title, all it does is mean work. So
Yeah.
when you what gives you a title, that's all it means, is that they're trying to have you to work some more. So that was really, I guess, part and parcel of someone saying you're doing good work and we want you to do more good work. And it's a point of recognition, but it's also a point of contention that they want you to continue to work and do what you want to do, to hold you part of the community, hold you responsible. So there's certain type of things that you want to uplift yourself and uplift your people and uplift the people that uplifted you. And so part of that is that I have been steadfast. I lived in the village in 1975 and went back in 1981. And it was a hard time initially going there as a way of really escaping, because really what happened in the cultural history that happened in Harlem, you wasn't able to practice your religion. And so it was the advent of the thought that we would be able to move to a place where you could be yourself. And so that really relying on a sense of sovereignty and the need for sovereignty. And so they created a village down in South Carolina. And then after doing that, they created a second village. And the interesting thing, they pooled their money and brought this piece of land. And this piece of land, which it was called sovereign, so that you could get to this piece of land and you could practice and be able to be your own way. You could live your own way. And they carved the trees from the trees, and they did the clearing, and they did all the work and the planting of trees and planting of everything. And this was a purpose so that people could find a home by which they could call their Orishas. And so they then have their temples, and each place where Oya and Oya or Lokun and all the various deities were being able to be housed. Drums were being played, and you could play and dance, and you could walk around nude or walk around in your African clothes without being interfered with. And so that was the idea, because here in there's an old song that says, "This ain't no place for a man to be free. This ain't no place for a man to be me." And it tells us about wanting to be yourself, and how you're going to be able to be yourself, and how you're going to do that living in the city. New York City is
Yeah.
almost it's horrible. You just can't, and we see that it's isolation, continuous isolation of trying to keep us down, and not allowing us to grow as a religion, as a culture, as a people.
Yeah, and I think that's why Ifa is such a testament to our ancestors and the fortitude they left within us, because the fact that it's still around and the fact that we're still able to practice, even though sometimes, it is difficult, when you want to do something at the ocean or you want to do something at the Four Corners without being scrutinized, the idea of having a sacred space like that with all the groves where you can just be is really, once again, pioneering. It's really interesting. Uh-huh.
No, I was going to say that.
Absolutely. So, what really interests me is, you're mentioning the roots of the Oyotunji village, and how, there was that reconnection with the Lukumi practice in Cuba.
Oh
And
my, yes.
you look at Oyotunji having obviously very 𝗃𝗍𝗃 influences now in practice. How do you feel about this schism, or pseudo schism as I like to call it, that's happening between these two traditions, and how important is it to find that collaboration and common ground for us to be able to enrich ourselves and our families?
Well, like you said, pseudo schism is probably the best way to put it. I mean, I find, uh, you know, my teacher, one of my teachers was one of the first African American orientees, which, Renard Simmons, and whose
Wow.
interest is Odu was Otura Meiji. So that actually, and the
Wow.
Onishong. So he was initiated in 1967, and he has had end up becoming 𝗃𝗍𝗃, or going into 𝗃𝗍𝗃 religion. But of course, he was steeped in the Lukumi tradition. And some of the things, or the fusion between Lukumi tradition as well as the 𝗃𝗍𝗃 tradition, of fusing them together, is really what I know. I know not to just, think that, you're going to be practicing 𝗃𝗍𝗃 by yourself in here in the United States. Some of the wonderful ideas that came out of Cuba, and some of the ideas that it comes through spiritualism, particularly in Puerto Rico, and where it was, so not only the Kardashian kind of, but just the
Oh, yes.
development of spiritualism. It's very, very instrumental in being able to connect with your ancestors, and to be able to have a sense of your quadrant de spiritual, and really moving through the whole whole spectrum of everything. So I I do appreciate, some of the things that came, but we do give honor and praise to those elders that came from the Lukumi tradition. And I think it's vital and important to realize that some of those things that they preserved and was able to then pass on, um, helped for those who then became 𝗃𝗍𝗃, or tried to get a sense of what 𝗃𝗍𝗃 is. But we all are part of the same tradition. Sango is still Sango. 𝘃𝗍𝗃 is still 𝘃𝗍𝗃. 𝗃𝗏𝗃 is still 𝗃𝗏𝗃, or Oba, or Inle, or sign, or whatever. And we still want them to manifest in any kind of way. And so even it may have manifested in Trinidad and Tobago in one way, it manifested a different way in Jamaica and Puerto Rico, or even Haiti. But still, Ogun is Ogun. Ogun Yemoye, Ogun Alona, Ogun Gangara, Gangara, Atiti Ogun. When we call Ogun, we want him to respond. And we want him to crash and to break down and to clear the way, because he's the owner of the road. So let the owner of the road own it. And so when we call that force, it doesn't matter if you're 𝗃𝗍𝗃, it doesn't matter if you're Lukumi or you're Haitian Voodoo, whatever, we are one, and we need to unite. I just made a trip to Mecca, and I watched them come together and they pray. We need a unified body by which we come together and pray, but we also need to be able to have to support, where we're able to pull together and pool together our resources and have a respect and commonality among our brethren, that we can come together and pray. Not only pray, but also be able to have we need to have a financial structure together, where we can see ourselves in the future. If we do not come together, we are going to be bound to extinction, because of really being blotted out through Christianity, being blotted out by Hindus, being blotted. I mean, there are people who are mixing Hindu tradition in, when you go to Benin, they're mixing the voodoo, they're mixing it's just mixed, it's hodgepodge almost. But where is the clear cut sense of what is our tradition, what and who we are? Even though we have given birth through all of these, and if you go back to the Meta, going back to Egypt, or if you go through, Islam, and go into Persia, and the connection between the different things, but what is the real thing? It's about developing our light, and our light and dark with it in ourselves. It goes back to our binary system in the Ifa, that we have Oyeku and Ogbe and Oyeku, and they are they give the birth to all the other Odus. So that's really what it is. It's light and dark, one and two, the same sense that the computer was arranged, and the same thing that, the wisdom that Socrates used is the same wisdom that Ifa has always been preaching.
Yeah, definitely back to the roots and back to the bases. You look at existence, it's either something or nothing, ones and zeros, ones and twos, however you draw it at that moment. And it's really interesting. You mentioned your trip to Mecca, which I applaud. It must have been a wild and wonderful experience. But you look at gentlemen like Malcolm X, when he actually did his Hajj, and he went back and he was able to realize, look at all these different cultures and ethnicities and colors, that we're all kneeling together. We're all facing each other. We're all embracing each other shoulder to shoulder. And it was from what I understand, it was a huge epiphany for him, before, unfortunately he transitioned. But I remember, being a young Lukumi Babalawo, I did Ifa. I hopped in when I was 23. So, I'm surrounded by all these giants, and, I'm just trying to study and, make sure I'm doing as I'm told. And, but one thing I realized very quickly, because back in 2015, I feel like 𝗃𝗍𝗃 was going through a real renaissance period as far as, coming over and propagating. I realized that this was going to have to be part of my study, because, there was so much enriching information over there and really great things to learn. I went through that apprenticeship as well, and I thank God for it, even though my base practice is Lukumi. Just the diversity it provided me, learning how to consecrate deities like Egungun and Aje, and, seeing how the 𝘃𝗍𝗃 is done, and just being able to confirm our beliefs even more, seeing how, our ancestors may have done it more traditionally, was very gratifying for me, and has made me a much more well-rounded priest and professional. So, I completely, it resonates with me beyond, what I could even say. So I do have a off-topic question for you. We got to get to this, because you've been interacting with some very, notable people, possibly, Hollywood's Babalawo. How, How did you interact with Morgan Freeman? How did that come to pass? Walk us through that process from beginning to end. How does that happen?
So my student, Ifakunle Wood, she's a doctor from Harvard University, and
Wow.
when she and I had been working together, she came to me. She had just she hadn't really gone through too much of education process, but we started moving together, and she started training with me, and she was doing her master's at the time, and we pushed her to go to Harvard. So Harvard, from Harvard to Hollywood. That's what I would call my Harvard to Hollywood. So she went to Harvard, and she brought me in because I was able to do divination and do the rituals to able to help her to get into Harvard. She got a full scholarship and go full run. Did
Wow.
her got her degree, which was just amazing, just an amazing story. From humble beginnings, coming from Bronx Community College, and then from Bronx
Wow.
Community College being the valedictorian, then to be, going to Harvard and studying, and she got a full ride. And so she brought me on almost like a thanks. Baba, you've been there with me, helped me, you've guided me through all these Ifa and stuff like that. And so she brought me there, and I spoke, and it was one of the coldest day in the year, and I packed the house. And I was just telling my story about talking to the dead, and some of the things I hadn't even actually planned. I had a whole list of things that I wanted to speak about, and it didn't come, and I just kind of really just let it go. And some of the things I was actually came like an epiphany as I was there, because I had talking to the dead as I was a child, and so some of parts of my life was of that, and people were just fascinated and just really, really just enjoyed me. So that particular podcast or that particular talk was actually on Harvard's page, and I also had it on my website at one point in time, and they picked it up. They heard it, they wanted to hear more about it, and they enjoyed it, and they asked me to come and be a part of their show, and I agreed. And of course, what I did is I reached back to my goddaughter, and I said, "Listen, they want to know if I have anybody who can be with me on the show. You want to do it?" And so hence that's how she got on the show. I pulled her in. She
Nice.
pulled me there. I pulled her here. She pulled, so we go back and forth that way. And that's what it really was. And Morgan Freeman was amazing. He's an amazing human being, and he wouldn't let them, in spite of all of what they were trying to do to identify Egungun as a scary and ugly type of creature, or they tried to do everything to make him. He said, "I won't say it. I won't say it." He was very, very clear that he felt that it wasn't scary, and he wasn't going to say it wasn't scary. And they were trying to make him say certain things about our culture and religion, and if my segment was cut shorter than the other segments. Part of that was
I
because
noticed.
they were saying things that we didn't agree to, and part of that was no, that's not a, oh, you believe in multi gods. I said, no, you have to take all of that out, because I don't believe in multi gods. I believe in Olodumare. I believe in Olodun. Edumare. I believe in one God, and we believe in one God. But we have adverse people who are His assistants, no different than angels. That we have that in our culture and our religion, and so that was what part of why they had to cut it, because they were saying some stuff that was offshoot. They were trying to do what they normally did, but we had a certain type of eye on it, and they allowed us to have that say. But of course, they also have then cut the our programming. They cut some of our show that way, though.
Wow, that's really comforting because you look at somebody like Morgan Freeman, he's like family. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, when you see that man and you're like, that guy could be on my couch, he could be an uncle, he could be a grandfather. He is the prototype, and to know that, whether he practices Ifa or not, he felt enough obligation and enough
Did
seriousness to protect it and the image they were trying to portray. And that's really comforting to see that there are authentic people such as that man, especially the way he's portrayed still in the entertainment industry. So that's very comforting.
he was amazing, and I learned a lot about him. And it was Morgan Freeman, and really having I've had so many. I was in Newsweek, I was in different magazines as a result of Word national magazines, international magazines, as a result of being on that show. And I had been
Sure.
interviewed by CBS, and I had been interviewed by different networks, because they wanted to do follow-up stories as a result of that. And it was an amazing thing, because he set the bar by which we were being seen and recognized throughout the world as a part of God, as the story of God. And that's really important, that we have to become a part of what the story is. When they write the story, our handprints need to be in the sand, not in a bucket of water, in the sand, by
I
which we
see.
can leave legacy, by which they can be followed. And that's really about the importance of history. History defunks the mystery. We have to we once we study the history, like you study the Odus of Ifa, and you begin to engulf the history, and that history, it takes away all the mystery.
Definitely. What a profound experience. Really entertaining and really, for being a young Babalawo, when I saw it, I said, wow, look where we can go. Look who we can interact with and who could take us seriously, and it's very comforting, just like it's going to be comforting for all the generations that come after and see it. Now, I'd like to take a moment and thank your goddaughter Danielle for putting us in contact with you. Fabulous personality, wonderful interview that's going to be coming out, I would imagine, before this one. And, what was that first experience like interacting with her, especially, once again, now you're in the limelight, now you're on another show, little different context, much more social with reality TV. What was that first interaction with her like, and then leading into the show and the situations that, you were able to help her with?
So, the interesting thing, leading, she's a wonderful human being, and she has a very, very clear vision. And when she first initially came to me, she wasn't on the show. And so she had some work. We did some rituals for her. And interestingly enough, things turned out in that way for her. And she reached back, and she thought I wouldn't even do the show. And I decided to do the show because, in spite of, um, in terms of, they later then changed what the initial um, projection of how we were being portrayed. They changed it, and they almost made me look like a buffoon at some point in time. Initially, that wasn't what was first sent out over the air, and they recapped it and removed it and had people's reaction. But the idea is very important, and I got some flack in our community, like, why did you do that? What did we got to be, look, publicity, and I understand theater and being on television, and I've been on good podcasts, and I've been good sets and bad sets. And the really real idea is that I want to be able to be out there and seen, showing positive images and positive role models, and like for yourself, you saw me, and there's something that might have been instilled inside of you, that, look what this Babalawo did. He went and and he's on television, and look. And what does that do for people who are coming behind me, to say there's possibilities of us as a religion being respected and being acknowledged? And those two things are very, very vital and important. Now, how it's being evaluated is also, then once you get your face out there, then you have a voice. You can then use your voice to springboard your own agendas. And one of my agendas is, really, I've been springboarding my book. I wrote a book, and it's called Bliss. And I've been really trying to get people to get happy and realize that after a while of all the different things that you do, you need to realize that not only you're going to be a part of the sense of tradition, but also what part of your life is going to be happy. What part of you that's going to help you to instill a sense of goodness, a sense of purpose for the future. And so and so you have to make a mark. And so part of that in my new campaign is not only about Ifa, and really and although Ifa talks about happiness, and the different odus that talk about, like 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗏, no, 𝗃𝗶𝗍𝗏, also one of the great stories is about and 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏. There's a lot of different odus of Ifa that talk about happiness, but how do we obtain those things? And so part of that is being out there in the forefront and being a leader, and wanting to take the reins and to set forth a road by which someone else could come behind you and follow.
I really love that concept, especially of happiness. I have this wild theory, and most people are taken aback by it. But, man, since his inception, has always wondered, why are we here, right? And I think Ifa has clarified quite a bit for the people who've been able to experience it. But, after, years of study, I've come to the conclusion that we are here nothing more or for nothing more than Olodumari's wishes to see us happy. And
Ashe.
that's really difficult for some people to accept. Like, there has to be something more. But I think it's very easy for me to accept, because the idea that our Supreme Creator is so benevolent and has sacrificed so much and tolerates so much simply for our own gratification. And what's scary is that society as a whole can't accept that. And that, the idea that somebody could do something so benevolent, so charitable, so loving, to just want to see us happy and it's kind of like children. I look at my daughter, my kids, they're the funniest thing to me, not by no means jeering or anything like that, but they do things that you just want to laugh. You're like, where
Yeah.
did that come from? Or their happiness brings me joy, or,
Yes.
whatever nonsense they do. And it's sad that we as a race, as a people, as a civilization, it's become more difficult for us to accept there is an energy out there that just wants to see us do well for their own gratification of us seeing us do well, so, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I realize that we are here, and Rumela said in Ijugbe, it says he retreated, and the reason he
Yes.
retreated from he didn't want because people didn't understand the beginning and end of all things. And what did he retreat to? He retreated, and as he saw Eshu, and he saw Eshu and Ogun, and he saw Shango, he said, "You want to play a game of Ayo? Want to play a game of happiness? This idea of game or this and they couldn't even conceive of the time in which they wanted to play the game. They're too busy looking into the future and things that they wanted to get to obtain the thick instead of living in the here and the now. We don't have a beginning. We don't have a past. We have only the now. And Ifa, of course, in Ijogbe tells us how we can look and we can see the beginning and end of all things. We can see those things, but we have to live in the now. And we have to live in the present. And the present is so very, very important because the past is gone. We can't recover that. And the future is unseen. But our future is now in the presence of the things that we make our points and our plans will determine the best way to plan for the next 5 years. Where you're going to be in the next 5 years is how you spend your time, your energy, and effort right now. And that's where you want to be. And so, how you're here in this wonderful podcast and you've been giving this information, it's going to be and blossom seeds to the youth. People who are coming behind you are going to gravitate to you, then going to want to study Ifa and want to grow in the knowledge and want to match the great wisdom that Ifa has to be able to offer to the future. This is a monumental. This is very, very important. I didn't even have to think twice to say, you want me to be? I want to be here. I want to be on here. I want to be able to let them know that this is a good thing. And if Baba Ifakunle is going to do anything, he's going to make a stance in the place of people who are righteous. And so righteousness and the idea of coming through. And so we want to have the right to be able to be free and clear, to be able to pursue our dreams, our wishes, and also the right to be happy. And Africans have always, or African people or traditional people across the board, celebrate. And so let us celebrate the goodness of our existence. Let us celebrate the goodness of our life. And as much as we can, we need to celebrate. So you told me you're having your Ifa celebration. I will be there. I'll get on the plane and I'll be there because it's that important to make a scene, a stance, and to stand with our brothers and sisters who are celebrating the goodness of Ifa and the tradition.
Baba, you have no idea how much it means to have you rain those blessings through your ashe and your words upon us. And, you've been nothing but an exemplary, professional and priest and man, in the face of so many people who try to scrutinize and, oppress and try to take away from what it is that we stand for and do. You've been nothing short of a warrior. And before I bring things full circle, I have to ask you about the beautiful tapestry that you have behind you. It's really glorious. If you could just let us know, how did that come into your possession, and just a little bit about it. It's so beautiful.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give you a better view of it, a little bit more. And if
Wow,
you know, there are, uh, you know, um, I'm trying to do better. All the different Orisha behind us.
gorgeous.
It's it's up on the wall here, and it has Sango, it has Ogun, it has Oya, and it's actually I got it in Brazil. So it was definitely a wonderful, wonderful tapestry. I enjoy it. I have a different colors. It was looking so nice until I messed with this camera now. But so yeah, it's definitely a part of the collection that I got in my travels. And I have some tapestries that I have that are specifically from Nigeria, which are also very, very wonderful, showing the Orisha. It's very, very important for us to decorate our homes. And I do paintings. I paint pictures of the Orisha, and it's very important for us to use our artistry and our creativity. And so this is just I absolutely love it. I have one in blue and different one, Yemanjá, Oshun, Obatala. Praise to all of them. They didn't have Ifa, so that's what we have.
Orula sometimes arrives late at the party. He's a boring guy. He shows up with his book, but he's still a good time. Baba, how can people get in contact with you?
Well, very easily. I'm www.ifakunle.com, Ifakunle.com. I am Babalawo Ifakunle on Instagram. You can basically find me very easily, 917-570-0323, for classes, divinations, lectures, anything that they're interested in, really to expand the light. But definitely, I give thanks and praise to you, Joe, and wonderful work that you're doing. I wish you much success. I wish you longevity and the strength of your life. When you ever plant one corn seed in the earth, you never should ever get one corn seed in return. You should get bushels and bushels. And I pray that each and every day and every podcast and everything that you do, that you will not only get one seed, but you'll get bushels and bushels of seeds and seeds and seeds and bushels of reward. Let's not only study the roots, let's begin to pick the fruits. And I hope that you'll be able to enjoy the wonderfulness of eating the fruits from those things that you have planted.
Baba, thank you for a classic interview. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all of your efforts, and thank you for a lifetime of dedication to what our ancestors left us, and just nothing but thanks. And hope to speak soon. And I don't know, this was pretty epic. We might have a part 2 soon.
We have to have a part 2. Oh my goodness, this was Joseph. This was one of the best episodes.
This is what decades of experience looks like, man.
I'm sure the audience is captivated right now. And when this episode releases, if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you obviously subscribe if you haven't, and definitely and comment, because I'm sitting here behind the wall like, oh my god, like
classic.
All this information. But hey, guess what though?
Oh, we got some shout outs.
Yeah.
Elevator music, Baba. That's what we do.
It's that time again. Another classic episode. If you do appreciate that, and you want to know more, you want to be more in part of our community, you can join. We have 3 separate tiers, all offering different perks. But it's time for some shout outs to show some love to the people who show love to you.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's show some love to the VIPs. We got JG.
JG, thank you.
We got Soleil.
The VIPs.
We got Sheree Lee.
Thank you very much, Sheree.
We got Miss Pierce.
Thank you.
And let's shout out the super fans. We got James 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃.
Thank you, James.
We got Mama Magical.
𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃.
And celebrating 13 months, we got 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃.
Shout out to 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 for being a real OG. A couple closing notes and thoughts before we go ahead and disconnect. 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 is up and running for all your needs, whether it be services or products. We do ship. Please be sure to look in the description to be able to see some of the links that Baba provided to be able to get in contact with him that much quicker. Great interaction for sure. The podcast is on all the major audio outlets as well. It's doing very well. Merchandise is for sale. Bunch of great things, guys. But
oh yeah, Joe, we just hit 30,000.
Oh, I wasn't gonna say nothing. You said it, guys. We went up very quickly this month from 20 to 30K. It's one of those things where you kind of look and you just sit back and you see that thing going up every day, and it's very humbling, and we appreciate it. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And from all of us here, thank you. And until next time, see the light.